Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we're going to talk about credibility, how it's built, how it's lost, and how some people try to borrow it back. When someone's public record raises serious questions, attaching yourself to Tupac Shakur's inner circle doesn't erase the paperwork. Tonight's episode is about Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., the security that failed, the controversy, and why proximity to Tupac, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't allow you a ticket to rewrite history. Let's get into some of this straight game.
Life is like those cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. I thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time this evening, knowing that it's Saturday night and we in the spot. If you don't believe me, just watch. Ladies and gentlemen, who is Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. in the public record, right? I want you to understand something. Before opinions, let's start with the documents, right? Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has long positioned himself as a former death row era security figure with insider knowledge, right? Over the years, he's appeared in interviews and documentaries offering versions of events tied to death row, Tupac, and the East and West Coast conflict. But credibility isn't built on stories alone, ladies and gentlemen. It's built on consistency, right? Public interviews, sworn testimony, claims versus corroboration, changing narratives over time, all of that, right? Now, one of the biggest credibility fractures comes from what often is referred to as the Homeboy Security situation, ladies and gentlemen, involving Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Multiple former associates and court-connected materials have raised questions about cooperation with law enforcement involving individuals connected to death row security. Now let's be clear, or should I say let me be clear, right? We're talking about allegations, testimonies, and paperwork that exists in the public domain, not in internet rumors, right? And I want you to understand why cooperation allegations matter in hip-hop history, why silence or deflection doesn't resolve documented disputes. So trying to deflect and be silent and all of that, why it does not resolve the documented disputes, ladies and gentlemen, and how credibility is impacted when some stories change after legal pressure. I want you to understand something. Into Tupac's confidants. Here's where the things really, truly, honestly get interesting, y'all. In recent years, or should I say recent days, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has increasingly tried to align himself with people described as close to Tupac, confidants, family, adjacent voices, and individuals with emotional proximity to Tupac. That proximity creates optics. Listen to me. I'm going to say it again. That proximity creates optics, the appearance of something, right? But optics are not evidence. Let me tell you why. And so, when we talk about Tupac Shakur, we know about all the lies that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has told in the past. Just recently, I witnessed a video of him interviewing the brother Neckbone. And so in that interview, once again, Neckbone was somebody who Tupac wrote about in the song To Live and Die in L.A. and may Pac rest in peace. And Buntry rest in peace. Heron rest in peace. I'll say this. When it came down to it really mattering, ladies and gentlemen, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. wasn't there. So it would be disingenuous, and I can understand people handling their business whichever they choose the way to handle their business, to try to one talk about somebody before they became or came on the scene. You know, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. would mention various individuals before they got a chance to speak, basically telling their stories and telling stories about them, alleging crimes that they may have committed that they probably wouldn't have wanted to talk about. And namely, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, the Keefe D situation. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Pretended to be a confidant of Keefe D, right? And then after everything had came to fruition, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. would go on Bums First and say that he actually, in fact, and I quote, lined up Keefe D, meaning he set Keefe D up for the downfall. When somebody says that they lined somebody up and is taking credibility or credit for lining somebody up, my first thing is I want to stay as far away from this individual as possible, right? I'm not involved in anything illegal or anything like that. And let me bring this full circle for you so that you understand where I'm coming from. So when he said that about Keefe D, it was a video recently on Bums First where they played it again, and where Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. attempted to call Keefe D on the shooting anniversary or death anniversary of Tupac Shakur. Once again, playing the game with no real concern about Tupac. Once again, wanting to implicate himself as some kind of savior or solver of the Tupac homicide, in which, in fact, Keefe D said that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Participated in the planning and was involved with that on ABC News, ladies and gentlemen, and that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and his security team helped orchestrate the situation. Let's be very clear about this. I don't know if that's true or not, because I wasn't there. I'm just going on the facts. And like I said, that's public information, as I said when I first started this segment. So by that being what that is, ladies and gentlemen, when one tries to then do an interview and then tries to get somebody who was actually there to justify or try to exonerate themselves from what has been alleged by somebody who is now in prison for the or being involved or a co-conspirator in the death of Tupac Shakur, we have to be very careful about that. We have to be very careful about the questions that are being asked, how they're being asked and framed, as to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. wanting to try to exonerate himself and put some credibility, or should I say borrow some credibility, in reference to doing an interview. And like I said, I understand what that is and what that means. But let me give you this, ladies and gentlemen, because this is very important. Very important. Like I told you, the lies about Gotham, the lies about Suge, the lies about running Death Row, the lies about Orlando Anderson snatching the chain, the lies about him wanting Frank Alexander to testify in front of the grand jury. Just lie after lie after lie after lie, ladies and gentlemen. Too many lies to actually go over again, because I don't want to be repetitive. But what I want to show you is this. When one attempts to try to regain credibility with the very people or persons that they turncoated on 3 days after Tupac Shakur's death, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to zero in on this. I need you to really pay attention to this because, like I say, a lot of times, based on the viewership of videos, people will hear somebody and think that they have credibility when they have none. We heard videos that I've put out and where Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., when understanding that we understood that he was fired by Tupac on August 27, 1996, his true feelings was, fuck that nigga. I really didn't need that money, that little $300 or $400 that I was getting from him anyway, right? So we understand motive as to what Keefe D was saying in reference to how he basically said on ABC News that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Was a co-conspirator or an alleged orchestrator, ladies and gentlemen. I'm only going to give you the facts. I'm not going to tell you what I'm feeling. I'm going to give you the facts. But more so than that, I need you to really pay attention to what I'm about to show you. Because over on Vlad, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. conducted an interview with Neckbone. Now, Neckbone was a confidant of Tupac's, right? At the time of his death, right? Tupac put him in to live and die in L.A. So that right there to me tells me that Tupac had some kind of affinity or relationship with Neckbone because he felt like, hey, you know what? These some down ass brothers, and whatever his relationship was, I'm not going to try to describe it. Whatever Tupac's relationship was at that time, it was solid enough that he would put them in a song, right? And so, when asking the questions to Neckbone, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. tries to infuse himself as a means of being exonerated by Neckbone's testimony as to what he understood because Neckbone was there. Right? Understand that. I need you to understand. So once again, when asking questions of Neckbone, you can ask him questions about what he was what his knowledge of the situation was. But Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. tried to get police slick. You know what I mean? I call it police slick, right? And said, well, what about when they tried to say, that Suge and I, and the security, had something to do with it. We see what you're trying to do, right? And then I go back to the situation in where before Keefe D was back on the radar, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said he set Keefe D up with all of the interviews, right? He said that, I set him up, I got him on Vlad and I got him on All the Dialogue and I got him on all of these other places, right? Then when Keefe D was arrested, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. did a turncoat move. And the turncoat move was, I lined him up. I set him up, right? Like, oh, wow. At 1 minute he was talking about claiming credibility for, getting them the interviews. And then the next minute he's talking about how he lined him up. I'm like, oh, wow. This is some devious shit here. This is some devious stuff going on. Okay, cool. So now when I hear the brother Neckbone's interview, like I said, Neckbone was one of the people that was there. He does have a story to tell based on what he's saying. Now, understanding what that is and understanding the feeble attempt to try to exonerate himself, meaning Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., based on all the lies that he's told, the inconsistencies, the calling of his father immediately after, before any investigative party was even on the situation. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. seemed to know everything that was going on, which then and there corroborates Keefe D's, alleged accusation. Not only that, but in the 2009 statement, as I told you before, Keefe D said Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., he saw him in the entourage of cars. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. That is actually, listen, ladies and gentlemen, that is actually a factual statement in the 2009 Las Vegas Police Department statement that Keefe D gave to them. after being or after the understanding that he was under a proffer deal, right? Now, understanding that, and you sit back and you say, okay, wow, amazing. And this is the part that's really amazing. I want you to understand, because for me, and only for me, if I know somebody told on people that I know, right? And see, this is the thing. You can tell where the animosity was, because after the death of Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight was aware that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. had failed him. Miserably had failed him. Not just from a standoff distance and thinking it, but from a upfront, up close and personal conversation which himself, Frank Alexander, and Suge Knight had. Frank talked about that, right? And said when Tupac got hit, how it went down. Suge was on the phone. The people from the hospital called him, or somebody called him and told him that Tupac had just passed. And Suge threw the phone across the room. This is what Frank Alexander's first-hand account was in regards to that. I believe that account. And then he said that they proceeded to ask Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., well, where was you at? What's up, Reg? What happened? And Reggie began to pass the buck. He began to pass the buck. Now, we know for a fact, beyond any shadow of a doubt, from Tim Matthews, who was Michael Moore's roommate, that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. did take Michael Moore off of Tupac. Why? Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has never been able to explain that. After Michael Moore was on Tupac earlier that day, as they were at the MGM earlier that evening gambling before the actual fight. But for some odd reason, according to Tim Williams, who was a death row security also, Tim Williams said Michael Moore was pissed that he was being taken off of Tupac, and Tupac did not never know. Listen, Michael Moore said when they were at the Luxor and when he went upstairs, Michael Moore said he knew to himself that he was never coming back downstairs. He said he knew to himself that he wasn't going to be on Tupac that night. But he also said that Tupac never knew that. You get it? So Tupac was in the dark about that, about the security being pulled off of him and so on and so forth. So Frank Alexander, after early in that evening, for whatever reason, at some lawyer's office or whatever, was told that he couldn't carry his gun based on the lack of permit, lack of paperwork, whatever have you, the politics involving carrying a firearm in Las Vegas, right? Which tells you another thing that was very unprofessional at that time. So they proceed to roll. Now, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has also lied about talking to Tupac prior to his death, and Tupac actually calling him on the phone trying to figure out where Suge was. Frank Alexander admitted that it was him that Tupac told to go make that call. That's not a call that Tupac would make himself. Tupac does not do that kind of work. Tupac ain't running to no payphone calling Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. from the MGM Grand, because Frank Alexander did not have a communication apparatus, no radio, no nothing. Frank Alexander said that he called Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. twice from the MGM Grand earlier that evening, right? To let Suge know where Tupac was when they were over there gambling. And later that evening, once they got to the MGM Grand, because Suge was running late. And Tupac asked Frank again, yo, call Reggie and find out where Suge at, because he always late. Right? Reggie would then, in recent years, flip that around to say, oh, Tupac called me. I talked to him because he was trying to find, listen, these are facts, ladies and gentlemen. Tupac called me because he was trying to find out where Suge was. You know why Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. can't say that it was Frank? You know why? Because then that would make Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knowledgeable as to knowing and being in the know, because he had denied before that Frank Alexander was the only security guard on Tupac that night. He only admitted that after the fact, ladies and gentlemen. That's also documented, right? What a tangle web we weave when we to deceive. Once again, what a tangle web we weave when we conspire to deceive. So now, by that being what that is, Tim Williams got on there, basically told the truth on Bum's first channel himself. Michael Moore was pissed. Michael Moore said Tupac didn't know that I was being taken off of him. And when I went up to my room, Pac didn't know I was never coming back down to be with him that night. Tupac tells Frank to call Reggie to find out where Suge is. The only way that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knew that they even caught a cab back over to the MGM Grand when it was fight time is because Frank told him. He wasn't there. So by him not being there, once again, I go back to the Neckbone interview, and once again, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. trying to make proximity to Tupac, but he wasn't there. But Neckbone's story, he's trying to borrow that credibility back. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has no credibility, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to show you something right now, because after doing this, I can't see why nobody would ever want to talk to this guy, especially, from the guys who were hanging out with Suge while they were at the studio. Now, let me tell you about this. So now, after the situation, Tupac is pronounced dead on the 13th. Being pronounced dead on the 13th, Suge is in full knowledge that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. failed him. Full knowledge. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. can no longer hang with the team or be a part of the security because Suge knows now for a fact and without any shadow of a doubt that he's unreliable, right? How does he know that? And listen to me, let me give you this. I'm going to give you this. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was not only fired by Tupac on August 27th, 1996, but Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. basically was fired by Suge Knight also. And I'm going to show you how I know that. You ready? Watch this. Ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit A, factual proof. I need you to understand this. Check this out. I'm going to hold this up on the screen for all of the people who don't know. This is serious business, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious business. This is what a lot of people would like to overlook, but that is based on fact. I need you to pay attention to this, ladies and gentlemen. I need you to check this out. Look at this. 9/16/1996. Right? 12:05 hours. AM. Listen. AM. Right? AM. Watch officers Jeter and Yamamoto were working a crime suppression detail to address gang activity problems at Death Row Records, 18730 Oxnard Street, Suite 211. Listen, Officer Jeter spoke with the head of security at Death Row, right? Who, was he really the head of security? Or was that just the title? Because let's go into what he did and what happened. Look, Death Row, Reggie Wright. And was informed. So he was being an informant against his boss and against his boss's friends, or what they would call the Homeboy Security or homies or whatever you want to call them. Listen, Yamamoto and Jeter was informed by Mr. Wright that since the death of Tupac Shakur, approximately 3 days earlier, this is on the 16th, right? Marion Suge Knight was now using gangsters, Bloods from Compton, as his own personal bodyguards, and that they were armed. I want to pause right there. Doesn't that sound like somebody who's bitter? Doesn't that sound like somebody who's been relieved of their duties? Think about it for a minute. If he's telling the police that Suge is now using gangsters, Bloods from Compton, as his own personal bodyguards, and that they're armed, then that means that what? He's no longer in that position, ladies and gentlemen. He's no longer in that position. Go back to the situation with Tupac Shakur firing Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and go to Vegas and think about the security being pulled off of Tupac. Think about Suge basically saying, he called for 5 more securities, but Reggie never sent the security. Why? There you go with Keefe D and what he's saying involving the motive, right? Reggie sabotaging the security. And here we go again. It seems as what? If what Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. is telling Officer Jeter and Yamamoto is true, it sounds that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has once again been relieved of his security duties. And now, from what Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. is telling the police, Suge Knight is using gangsters, blood gang members from Compton as his own personal bodyguards and is now using gangster blood members. And that what, ladies and gentlemen? They are armed, or they were armed. Officer Jeter was familiar with Knight's personal vehicle, which was there at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to put you in the place, the time right here and now. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was outside of the studio or on the phone with these officers, ladies and gentlemen. He was telling on them in real time. In real time. What did Officer Jeter say? Officer Jeter was familiar with Knight's personal vehicle, which was there at the time. Hold on. That would mean that Officer Jeter was right outside the studio watching. And Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was outside talking to them, telling on these guys right while they were in the studio. Now, I don't know if Neckbone was with him that day. Only Neckbone knows that. Right? Listen to me, man. Listen to me. At approximately 0500 hours, Jeter's and Yamamoto observed 4 vehicles. The conversation led to an attempted felony traffic stop of Suge within hours, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, that conversation, 3 days after Tupac's death. Tell me, and let's go with, because I always admit this when you say what? Frame of mind. Let's go into frame of mind, ladies and gentlemen. What was Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s frame of mind when he was doing this? Nobody's ever asked him. I've heard no one ask him about this situation. What was his frame of mind when he was talking to Officer Jeter and Yamamoto, and basically lining, hold on, remember he said he lined Keefe D up, right? When he was lining Suge up. And the homies and Suge's homeboys, look, this is real time, real talk. This is an actual newspaper article, ladies and gentlemen. This ain't AI. This is real. So when Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was attempting to line Suge Knight up and all of the guys that were with him, the Bloods from Compton, as his own personal bodyguards, and that they were armed, what was Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s frame of mind? Absolutely, Fatima. Absolutely. I'm talking about, he was pissed off that Suge was like, you know what? This guy's unreliable. Go back to Tupac, y'all. Tupac fired him on the 27th. Suge just spoke about that on the Art of Dialogue not too long ago. Right? And Suge Knight said the same thing. That Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was pissed because Tupac fired him, and that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. fired back. That's what Suge Knight said on the Art of Dialogue. Go listen to the interview, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, a lot of people want to put Suge out there as being some kind of liar. Ladies, I don't know whether Suge lying or not. I know that this right here is consistent and corroborates what he was saying. Not only did Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said that he lined up Keefe D, it seems to me that he lined up Tupac too, taking the security off of him. See, it wasn't nobody else's job to protect Tupac. It was the people's job that were paid to protect Tupac. and that was Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and his failed security company. You can pass it once again, passing the buck. It was other guys that was with him that was even tougher than the guys that I had working for Right Way. That was the Homeboy Security, but the Homeboy Security, that wasn't the Homeboy Security job. It wasn't. And even if it was, who would tell on them on the 16th of September on 1996 if it was their job? Why would somebody claim in one breath that, the Homeboy Security, they was out there with Tupac and them too and blah, 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 but then 3 days after Tupac's death would then go tell the police on him? You can't win for losing dealing with this guy. 1 minute he gonna praise you, the next minute he gonna go tell on you. You understand what I'm saying? So I don't like to throw around half-ass accusations. I'm talking about facts, right? So the convo led to an attempted felony traffic stop of Suge Knight within hours. 4 vehicles leave death row records in gang caravan fashion. The officers observed Suge Knight in the middle vehicle of the caravan. The officers attempted to stop Suge Knight's vehicle, but were interfered in making the stop by the rear vehicle, a green Humvee, driven by rapper MC Hammer. All shots out to Hammer, ladies and gentlemen. Subsequently, Hammer was questioned and released, warned only. Knight and the rest of the gang caravan eluded the police. Or better yet, eluded what the former head of their security had snitched on them about. And like I said, it was all alleged. Nothing had been proven. But the fact that Officer Jeter and Yamamoto would come out and admit to this, ladies and gentlemen, admit to this, it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. Stephanie, it ain't even about believing it 100%. It's true. It's a fact. So if he was pissed that he got fired and got replaced by what he said were Bloods from Compton, right? Then how did he feel about Tupac firing him and sending him a fax that he would deny for almost 20 some odd years? Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about motive, right? When we talk about motive, we see it 3 ways to none. The lining up of Suge Knight 3 days after Tupac passed. The recent confession and saying that he lined up Keith D after setting him up with interviews and saying he interviewed him, introduced him to Vlad, introduced him to the Art of Dialogue and all of these other situations, right? So, once again, he comes down to interview Neckbone. And all I gotta ask, respectfully, Neckbone, was you in the entourage that day? No, seriously. Because at the end of the day, people do things for reasons that are unbecoming, but then would try to talk to somebody. It is out of, man, look, I'm baffled. I'm baffled. Because somebody who wanted to see me in the penitentiary or wanted me to go to prison, because, they were butthurt about losing their job. But see, not losing the job because somebody told on you and did something that, you came into work late or something like that. No. This is way more devastating that you would come to find out later. He sabotaged the security. He disobeyed a direct order. Then when confronted about the situation after the fact, he obfuscated and passed the buck, having or claiming no accountability at that particular time. And it was somebody else's fault, ladies and gentlemen. Then some 30-odd years later, some 30-odd years later, he would go to the grand jury after lying about the Nextel walkie-talkies, saying that they did not have a walkie-talkie feature on them. He would go to the grand jury and confess that he was upset with Frank Alexander because Frank Alexander did not contact him after the fight with Orlando Anderson. In fact, without a shadow of a doubt, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knew goddamn well that Frank Alexander did not have a radio because he knew Frank had called him from the MGM on the payphone, ladies and gentlemen. But he would go into the grand jury and pump fake like, oh, I'm mad at Frank because he didn't call me and blah, blah. No. He knew Frank didn't have a radio apparatus. He knew that when he went into the grand jury. So why would he tell him that story? To save face. Once again, like he passed the buck in 96. It was somebody else's fault. It was Frank's fault. He was there. He didn't do what he was supposed to. No. Who took Michael Moore off of Tupac? Huh? Who Tim Williams said Michael Moore was pissed. Once again, avoiding accountability, ladies and gentlemen. You see it right here. You see it right here. You can't, like I said once again, the paperwork still exists. The proximity to Tupac, the proximity to certain people does not change his lies and him telling. That doesn't go nowhere. A man is a man based on his character, right? And his integrity. It ain't about how much money you got. You got to be a man before you get money. You got to have character and integrity before you get money. But like I say, a lot of times, cats is out here, should I say, worshiping the wrong things, if you will, right? Worshiping the wrong things. But that's okay. That's okay. People are going to do what they're going to do. But like I told you before, ladies and gentlemen, this is what's real. This is what's real. You see it right here in front of your face. Right here in front of your face. So I want you to understand what it is that's being attempted here. People are trying to be used that have no credibility at all. Right? And one must be careful. Because it seems like Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. likes lining people up. Playing friend in 1 minute, and then later on, when something happened, claim like he was behind it, and knew about it and helped the situation, or was the hero to the situation, if you will. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is it right in front of you, right in front of your face, right in front of your face. And then, like I said, when he took Yaki Gaddafi down to the police, unbeknownst to the man's mother, Yasmin, and when she complained about it, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. had something slick to say to her also. Something disrespectful to say to her also. That's why she released the facts proving that he was fired by Tupac. Because she wrote the facts up. You see how it works? Right? Once again, Frank Alexander did all that he possibly could do. If you have any kind of doubt about that, all you got to do is go watch the video. Him and Tupac walked through the MGM Grand. It's pictures. It's pictures. It's pictures. Like I said, one man can only do so much to stop one man. That's just the way that it is. But like I said, when the security was sabotaged, ain't nothing you can do about that. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for watching the video that we're doing over on the Art of Dialogue with Jamal Ali Singh, right? You're going to hear a lot more truth, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all stay tuned. You need to tell a friend about that. Yeah, if you have not watched the video, go over there and watch it now. Tell a friend. Like I said, there will be more parts dropping. And like I said, she's coming with that A game. She's coming with the truth, ladies and gentlemen. And I heard a lot of people say certain things about Jamala, about they believe other people as to Tupac's bulletproof vest. and all of that, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. To be perfectly honest with you, and so that you are not dissuaded by what people believe or what they want you to believe, right? Based on what they've been hearing from people who weren't there. Just like I said, Neckbone has his story to tell he was there. You know what I mean? You know. But Jamala, we're not just talking about proximity, ladies and gentlemen. We talking about family. We talking about Afeni Shakur's niece, Tupac's mother, first cousin. No, she wasn't just around. She drove in the car with Tupac and them to Vegas. Not only that, she stayed and slept in the same room as Kadada Jones and Tupac Shakur. So if there was anybody to know that Tupac didn't have his bulletproof vest with him, it would be her. She right there, she see the suitcases. And like I said, you're going to hear more truth, that things that you didn't know about, right? As this interview continues to be aired. So I recommend that everybody tune in, tell a friend that, yeah, it's gonna get real revealing, ladies and gentlemen. Because people, running around talking, I see different channels, a Discretion TV over there in his feelings. You know what I mean? Talking real unknowledgeable, but just over there talking, you know what I mean? Once again, these people do not know what they're talking about. We're talking to family members. We're talking about people who not only had proximity, we're talking about blood relatives and people who were there. And she's going to tell the whole story about what it was, what it is, right? Like I said before, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate each and every one of you for stopping through, right? And giving me your time. Your boy Delray, tune in tomorrow to the Art of Dialogue and watch what he dropping. Straight game.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
They said Tupac was untouchable, but behind the walls of Rikers Island, he was just a man, wounded, watching his back, and wondering who he could trust. He survived bullets, betrayal, and isolation behind bars. But what happened inside those walls has never been told until now. In the darkest corner of Rikers, he found betrayal and a brotherhood no one saw coming. These dudes smiled in my face, then flipped and tried to kill me, and I never saw it coming. They were Puff's security, Biggie's muscle, Henchman's people, and Tupac knew exactly who sent them. This is the side of Tupac Shakur the world never got to see, told by the man who lived it with him, not in the studio, but in a 6x9 cell. The rap battles, sex and drama with female guards, the tears, the silence after Jada Pinkett's visit, and the moment Tupac almost broke. Before Death Row, before All Eyes on Me, before Machiavelli, there was Rikers. Behind the Walls with Tupac Shakur, available now on Amazon. Get your copy. Learn the truth.